Elizabeth Hale stood in front of the tall mirror in the small guest bedroom, smoothing down the soft blue fabric of her dress for the third time, even though there were no wrinkles left to fix. The room hummed quietly with the distant sounds of laughter and music drifting in from the backyard, where her younger sister, Alara Hale, was preparing to walk down the aisle in less than an hour. Elizabeth watched her own reflection, her brown eyes searching for something she couldn't name. "You look fine," she whispered to herself, though the words felt empty. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. A message from her mother flashed across the screen. "Where are you? People are asking for you. Come help your sister." Elizabeth sighed and typed back, "On my way." She hesitated before putting the phone down. There was a familiar tightness in her chest, the same one she had felt her whole life whenever Alara was in the room. From childhood talent shows to family dinners, Alara had always been the bright light everyone leaned toward, while Elizabeth stood quietly in the shadows. As she stepped into the hallway, she passed her aunt, who barely glanced up. "Oh, Elizabeth," the woman said absent-mindedly. "Have you seen Alara? She needs her veil fixed." Elizabeth nodded, even though she hadn't seen her. It was always like this, Elizabeth as the messenger, the helper, the invisible bridge between everyone else's happiness. She walked toward the sound of her sister's laughter, her heels clicking softly, her heart already bracing itself for another day of standing just outside the center of the story. Alara's bridal room buzzed with energy when Elizabeth pushed the door open. Bridesmaids crowded around the bed, holding flowers, laughing, and talking over one another. Alara stood in the middle, glowing in white, her smile wide and effortless. "There she is," Alara called when she spotted Elizabeth. "Took you long enough." Elizabeth smiled politely. "Mom said you needed help with your veil." Alara waved a hand. "Oh, that's already done. But since you're here, can you grab my phone from the kitchen? I left it by the cake table." Elizabeth nodded, already turning around. One of the bridesmaids leaned toward Alara and whispered, not quite quietly enough, "She's always so serious." Alara laughed. "That's just Elizabeth. She's been like that forever." Elizabeth paused in the doorway, the words landing heavier than they should have. She pretended not to hear and continued down the hallway. In the kitchen, she found her father nervously straightening napkins. "You excited, kid?" he asked, smiling. Elizabeth forced a grin. "Of course. It's a big day." He nodded, already distracted by a guest calling his name. Elizabeth picked up the phone and stared at the lock screen, a photo of Alara and her fiancé, their faces pressed together, joy frozen in a perfect moment. Elizabeth wondered when the last time was that anyone had taken a photo like that of her. She carried the phone back, feeling like a background character in someone else's movie, moving props from one scene to another while the real story unfolded somewhere else. When Elizabeth returned, Alara barely looked up. "Just put it there," she said, pointing to the dresser. Elizabeth placed the phone down carefully. "You look beautiful," she added quietly. Alara smiled, but it was quick, like a passing breeze. "Thanks. I knew you'd say that." One of the bridesmaids turned to Elizabeth. "So, are you seeing anyone?" Elizabeth blinked. "No, not really." Alara laughed. "She's married to her job," she joked, and the room erupted in giggles. Elizabeth felt her face grow warm. "Someone has to pay the bills," she said softly. The laughter faded a little, but the moment had already passed. Their mother stepped in, clapping her hands. "Okay, everyone, it's almost time." She turned to Alara, adjusting her necklace with loving care. "My beautiful girl," she whispered. Then she looked at Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, go check if the guests are seated." Elizabeth nodded, her role assigned once again. Outside, the chairs were filling, sunlight spilling across the lawn. Guests chatted excitedly, glasses clinking. Elizabeth stood near the edge, watching. A cousin approached her. "You must be so proud of your sister," he said. Elizabeth smiled, a little tired. "Yes, very proud." What she didn't say was how heavy that pride felt sometimes, how it pressed down on her own dreams, making them feel smaller, quieter, like whispers no one leaned close enough to hear. The music started, soft and slow, and everyone took their seats. Elizabeth found a spot in the second row, off to the side. She folded her hands in her lap, breathing in the smell of flowers and fresh grass. When Alara appeared at the end of the aisle, the crowd gasped. Elizabeth felt it too, the beauty of the moment, the weight of it. Her sister walked forward, radiant, her future waiting at the altar. Elizabeth clapped with everyone else, her smile steady. But as the vows began, her thoughts drifted. She remembered being 10 years old, standing on a school stage after a play, waiting for her parents to find her in the crowd. They had been busy congratulating Alara on winning a dance competition that same night. Next time, her mother had said back then. Elizabeth wondered how many next times had passed. During the ceremony, Alara's voice shook with emotion as she spoke about love, about being seen and chosen. Elizabeth felt a strange ache in her chest. Chosen. The word echoed. When the crowd cheered at the kiss, Elizabeth stood with them, clapping, her hands stinging. Her phone buzzed in her purse. A message from a coworker. Hope you're doing okay today. You deserve something good too. Elizabeth stared at the screen for a moment longer than she should have. She slipped the phone away, blinking back a sudden rush of feeling she didn't fully understand. Around her, everyone was celebrating a new beginning, while she felt like she was standing at the quiet end of a long, unfinished sentence. At the reception, the air filled with music and movement. Alara danced in the center of the floor, surrounded by friends, her laughter rising above the song. Elizabeth stood near the drink table, sipping water. Their mother joined her. "Why aren't you dancing?" she asked. Elizabeth shrugged. "I'm fine here." Her mother tilted her head. "You always say that." Elizabeth hesitated, then finally spoke. "Do you ever wonder how I'm really doing?" Her mother looked surprised, then uncomfortable. "Of course I do," she said quickly. Just then someone called for her. "Mrs. Hale, we need you for a photo." She squeezed Elizabeth's arm. "We'll talk later." Elizabeth watched her walk away. Alara appeared a moment later, breathless and glowing. "You're being weird today," she said lightly. Elizabeth met her sister's eyes. "Maybe I'm just tired of being quiet." Alara laughed, thinking it was a joke, and ran back to the dance floor. Elizabeth stood there, the music thumping around her, feeling something shift inside. For the first time, instead of shrinking back into her usual corner, she picked up her purse and walked toward the exit. No announcement. No goodbye. Just a soft step away from the noise. Outside, the night air was cool and calm. Elizabeth took a deep breath, feeling lighter with every step down the path, like she was finally walking into a story that belonged to her. Elizabeth didn't know where she was going at first. She walked past the parked cars, past the soft glow of lanterns tied to the fence, and down the quiet road that curved away from the wedding venue. The music faded behind her, replaced by the sound of her own footsteps and the distant hum of the night. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, she didn't check it. Instead, she stopped beneath a tall streetlight and leaned against the cool metal pole, letting the stillness wrap around her. "What are you doing, Elizabeth?" she whispered aloud. The question hung in the air, unanswered. A car slowed as it passed, and for a moment she wondered if it was someone coming after her, someone finally noticing her absence. But the car drove on. She laughed softly at herself. For years, she had waited for someone to turn around and ask, "Where did you go? Are you okay?" Tonight, she realized, maybe she didn't need that question to come from anyone else. She pulled her phone out and opened her messages. There was one from her coworker again, and another from her mother. "Where are you? We're about to do family photos." Elizabeth stared at the screen, her thumb hovering. Then, for the first time in her life, she typed something honest. "I needed some air. I'm safe. I just need time." She hit send and felt a strange mix of fear and relief wash over her. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an excuse. It was simply the truth. She found a small park a few blocks away, empty except for a single bench beneath a tree whose leaves whispered softly in the breeze. Elizabeth sat down, her dress pooling around her ankles, and finally let herself breathe deeply. Her mind wandered back through memories she had tried not to touch for years. She remembered the day she got her first promotion at work, how she had called her mother, excited and proud. "That's nice, dear," her mother had said, distracted. "Did you hear about Alara's new apartment?" Elizabeth remembered smiling then too, telling herself it didn't matter. She had always been good at telling herself that. Her phone rang suddenly, making her jump. It was her father. She hesitated before answering. "Hi, Dad." His voice came through unsure. "Your mom said you stepped out. Are you okay?" Elizabeth looked up at the dark sky. "I don't know," she admitted. There was a pause on the line. "Do you want me to come get you?" he asked. Elizabeth thought about it, really thought. "No," she said gently. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Her father cleared his throat. "I'm proud of you, you know," he said quietly. The words hit her harder than she expected. "For what?" she asked. "For being you," he replied. Elizabeth closed her eyes, holding the phone to her ear, wishing he had said that years ago, but grateful to hear it now. When she hung up, Elizabeth noticed someone standing a few feet away. It was her cousin Mara, holding her shoes in one hand. "I had a feeling you'd come here," Mara said, sitting beside her on the bench. Elizabeth smiled weakly. "I didn't tell anyone." Mara shrugged. "You have a look when you disappear. I recognize it. I've worn it too." Elizabeth laughed softly. "So, what's happening back there?" Mara leaned back, staring at the sky. "Alara's dancing, Mom's worried, and everyone keeps asking where you are." Elizabeth nodded. "Figures." Mara turned to her. "Do you want to go back?" Elizabeth thought for a long moment. "Not yet," she said. Mara smiled. "Good. Then let's not." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind. Finally, Elizabeth spoke. "I've spent my whole life feeling like I don't take up enough space." Mara looked at her seriously. "You take up plenty of space. You just learned to make yourself small." Elizabeth swallowed, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest. For the first time, she wasn't alone with the feeling. Someone had seen it. Someone had said it out loud. Later, Elizabeth decided to walk back. Not because she felt pulled, but because she wanted to choose it. The road felt different this time, shorter somehow. When she reached the entrance, the music was slower, softer. She stepped inside and immediately spotted her mother scanning the room. When their eyes met, her mother rushed over. "There you are," she said, relief clear in her voice. "I was worried." Elizabeth studied her face. "You don't usually worry," she said gently. Her mother frowned, then sighed. "Maybe I should more." Elizabeth nodded. "Maybe." They stood there, an awkward pause stretching between them. Finally, her mother spoke. "I didn't realize how much I leaned on you," she admitted. "You always seem so steady." Elizabeth felt something soften inside her. "Being steady doesn't mean I don't get tired," she said. Her mother reached out and took her hand. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything Elizabeth had ever wanted to hear. But it was something. And for now, something felt like enough. Alara found her near the dessert table, a half-eaten slice of cake in her hand. "You disappeared," Alara said, trying to sound casual, but missing the mark. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "You noticed?" Alara huffed. "Of course I did." They stood there, sisters in the middle of a room full of people, suddenly feeling like it was just the two of them. "I didn't mean to make today about me," Elizabeth said. Alara looked down. "I didn't mean to make every day about me," she replied. Elizabeth blinked, surprised. Alara continued, "I know I talk too much. I take up all the air. I guess I thought you were okay with it because you never said anything." Elizabeth set her plate down. "I didn't know how," she admitted. Alara nodded slowly. "Maybe we can learn now." Elizabeth smiled, small but real. "Maybe we can." They hugged, not the quick, polite kind, but the kind that lingered, full of things they didn't yet have words for. The night stretched on, and Elizabeth found herself laughing with people she usually avoided. A friend of Alara's asked her about her job, and for once, someone actually listened to the answer. She talked about her work, about the things she liked, and the things that scared her. It felt strange, being the center of a small circle of attention, but not uncomfortable. Just new. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her coworker. I meant what I said earlier. You really do deserve something good. Elizabeth smiled and typed back, I'm starting to believe that. She tucked the phone away, feeling lighter. The music shifted to a slower song, and Mara dragged her onto the dance floor. Elizabeth laughed as she stumbled through the steps, her heels forgotten, her hair coming loose. She caught her reflection in a window, messy, smiling, alive, and barely recognized herself. She liked this version. At a quiet table near the edge of the room, Elizabeth sat with her father again. He sipped his drink and watched the dancers. You look different tonight, he said. Elizabeth tilted her head. Different how? Taller, he said with a small smile. Elizabeth laughed. I didn't grow. No, he replied, but you're standing straighter. Elizabeth considered that. I think I am. Her father nodded. About time. They sat in comfortable silence, something they hadn't shared in years. Elizabeth realized she didn't feel invisible at that moment. She felt seen, not by everyone, but by the people who mattered. As the night began to wind down, Elizabeth stepped outside again, this time with Alara beside her. The stars were bright above them. I'm glad you came back, Alara said. Elizabeth shrugged. I'm glad I left. Alara laughed softly. Figures. They leaned against the railing together. I don't want us to be like this forever, Alara said. Distant. Elizabeth looked at her sister. Then don't let me disappear, she said. Alara nodded. Deal. They bumped shoulders, sealing it in the simplest way they knew how. Guests began to say their goodbyes, and the energy shifted from celebration to calm. Elizabeth helped stack chairs, not because she was asked, but because she wanted to. This time it felt like a choice, not a role. Her mother joined her, handing her a folded napkin. You don't have to do this, she said. Elizabeth smiled. I know. They worked together, side by side, and for the first time, it felt like partnership instead of expectation. When the last car drove away, Elizabeth stood in the empty space where the dance floor had been. The ground was scattered with petals and confetti. Alara and her new husband hugged their parents, laughing softly. Elizabeth watched them, not from the shadows, but from a place of quiet pride. She realized she could hold happiness for someone else without losing her own. Mara came up behind her. So, what's next for you? She asked. Elizabeth thought about it. I don't know, she said. But I want to find out. Mara grinned. That's the best answer. Elizabeth nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in her bones. Later, alone in her car, Elizabeth sat with the engine off, hands on the steering wheel. She didn't rush to leave. She let the night sit with her. She thought about the girl she had been, always waiting, always quiet. You did okay tonight, she said to herself. It felt good to say it out loud. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from Alara. Thank you for coming back. And for leaving. I think we both needed it. Elizabeth smiled and typed me too. As she finally drove away, the road ahead felt wide and open. Not empty. Open. Elizabeth rolled down the window and let the cool air rush in, carrying away the last of the old weight she had been holding for years. She didn't know what her future would look like, but for the first time, she felt like it belonged to her. Elizabeth parked outside her apartment and sat for a moment, looking up at the dark sky above the city lights. Somewhere, a wedding was ending, a new life was beginning, and quietly, without music or applause, her own story was starting too. She stepped out of the car, closed the door gently behind her, and walked toward her building with a steady, confident stride, no longer waiting to be noticed, no longer afraid to take up space, ready to live a life where her voice, her dreams, and her presence would finally be as loud and as real as her heart had always been. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Elizabeth's curtains in soft, golden lines, warming the quiet room in a way that felt almost intentional, like the day itself had decided to be gentle with her. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of the city waking up, cars passing, a neighbor's door closing, a bird calling from somewhere beyond her window. Her phone rested on the nightstand, face down, but she reached for it anyway, not out of habit this time, but curiosity. There was a message from her mother sent late the night before. I kept thinking about what you said. I don't want to miss you anymore. Elizabeth read it twice, then once more, letting the words settle. She typed back slowly, carefully. I don't want to be missed. I want to be included. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. Then let's start there, her mother replied. Elizabeth sat up, her heart beating a little faster. She went to the kitchen and made coffee, the familiar routine suddenly feeling new, like she was stepping into it as a different person. As she sipped from the mug, she whispered to the empty room, I'm here. The words weren't for anyone else. They were for herself. Later that afternoon, Elizabeth met Alara at a small cafe near the park, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and soft music playing low in the background. Alara was already there, stirring her drink nervously. I wasn't sure you'd come, she admitted when Elizabeth sat down. Elizabeth smiled. I wasn't sure either, but I wanted to. They ordered pastries they didn't really need and talked about small things at first, the weather, the honeymoon plans, a movie they both liked as kids. Then Alara grew quiet. I've been thinking about us, she said. About how I always run ahead and assume you'll follow. Elizabeth nodded. And I've been thinking about how I let you. They shared a small, sad smile. I don't want to lose you, Alara said. Elizabeth reached across the table and took her sister's hand. You won't, she said. But I won't lose myself either. Alara squeezed her fingers. Deal. The word felt stronger this time, not like a promise made in passing, but one meant to last. That evening, Elizabeth walked through her neighborhood as the sky turned shades of purple and blue, the air cool against her skin. Children played on the sidewalk, their laughter echoing down the street, and somewhere a radio played a song she didn't recognize but liked anyway. She stopped at a small park and sat on a bench, watching the world move around her, feeling part of it instead of apart from it. Her phone buzzed once more, this time with a message from her coworker. How was today? Elizabeth smiled and typed back it was honest. And that feels like a good start. She put the phone away and leaned back, looking up at the first star appearing in the sky. For years, she had measured herself by how quietly she could exist in other people's lives. Now, she measured herself by how fully she could stand in her own. Elizabeth stood up, brushed off her dress, and walked home with steady steps, carrying not just the weight of who she had been, but the lightness of who she was becoming, ready to keep writing a story where she was no longer a side note, but the voice that guided every page.